What's up YouTube? Today I want to carry on with my collaboration with Pete Callard, who has recorded quite a bit of guitar and who plays live with Shpongle. And we're creating a track which has got this really Shpongle vibe to it, and I figured a really cool thing to do would be to have a look at how they would have made these sort of tribal vocal loop type of things. So I've got my Zoom recorder over here. You guys can record using your phone as well. I want to show you a couple of cool techniques to use for that kind of thing. And I also want to go through how I figured out the transition from the kind of key change element to the more flat kind of bassline thing. If you've been following along with this series, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. If not, I'm going to post links to the other videos down below, and you guys can go check that out. Anyway, let's dive in and have a look. Okay, so remember from the previous videos, we've got these two parts. One that has a flat bass line and one that has a kind of key changing bass line or chord changes. I mentioned in the previous video that it kind of didn't sound too good when it changed from the kind of flat G minor chord into the progression of the A flat, B flat kind of thing. I'm going to go through this shortly, but I figured out the chords that sounded good when transitioning. That sounded good between the G minor and the A flat major, I believe it was, or the B flat major. Then I started, laying the chords in a synthesizer, and I wanted to get this kind of like smooth transition between each of the parts of the chord. And to do that nicely, what I did is I basically split the chord into 4 layers and then synthesized each one using a monophonic patch. So it's a very simple patch using Vital, just a saw wave with some glide, and each one has a slightly different glide. Let me just solo these so you can hear exactly what's going on with this sound here. And then I also put a bit of reverb on there. So essentially it's a chord that's playing, but each of the notes in the chord is being synthesized by a different synth. And then each of them, as you can see, like I've muted the ones that aren't playing in this layer, and then they're overlapping to create that kind of gliding effect from one chord into the other. And I felt that sounded pretty cool. So I wanted to put that in as the kind of like transition effect from the flat part into the moving part. So check this out. Let's see if this is going to work here. You may notice there's also another lead in there, which I'm going to get to shortly. That's also quite a intrinsic part in Shpongle tracks, is that kind of like bubbly saw wave lead, but I'm going to get into how I created that shortly. Let's just render this one out, and I can show you how I came about figuring out which chords are going to work. Okay, so here what I did is, to figure out what chord would work in that transition, I used a piano plugin because often that kind of like helps to, especially when you're trying to figure out like the arrangement of chords and stuff like that. Having a kind of like something full frequency like a piano can definitely help, because you're kind of hearing how it's going to sound, not on a singular kind of synth or monophonic synth or anything like that. You're not worrying too much of the sound design of something. You're focusing more on the kind of like arrangement of the chords and what chords work together, etc. So yeah, having something like a piano definitely helps for that kind of thing. And also something like Cubase's chord track is really, really nice, because you can just simply draw in, let me just pull up the pencil. We can just add in chords and then just either use the chord assistant over here or actually edit and draw in exactly what chord we want. For example, something like G minor, like we've got here, and stuff like that. So now what I did is, because I'm not too familiar with how the chord assistant works for the more advanced chords and that, and we're working in a G Phrygian, I simply just searched Google for what chords work in the G Phrygian. And then I just tried a bunch of different examples here until I came up with these. So here what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to do that again real quick. So here we've got a chart with all the different chords that work in the G Phrygian scale. So I actually just punched in what we had already, what the track consisted of. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to remove these two, And then we can just solo this piano over here and listen to what we've got here. So like I said here, what I did is I just experimented with what, the different chords that it said here work in the G Phrygian. So it says G minor 7th. No, that didn't work. Let's try C minor. So that's how I came up with what chords worked, and then I split those chords up to work within that kind of like polyphonic thing which I explained earlier to come up with this transition. Okay, so let's look at the bubbly type of lead. This is a very, very simple saw patch with a little bit of this high pass applied here. And then there is a LFO doing a modulation of the filter. This is not synced to the tempo of the project or anything. This is just free running. And then I've got a macro controlling the speed of that LFO. So the idea is that you're separating the kind of the tempo of this kind of like arpeggiator sound from that modulation and moving between this like what sounds like it's kind of in sync and slightly off sync. And this is a really nice way of creating these transitions between these two parts. So here what I've done is I've just got this melody which I think I took from that guitar riff and then copied it on here, and then I made a new melody using the idea that those kind of chords change. As you can see, it's just a very simple arp, and then the notes shift over here when that kind of chord change happens. So the idea is I wanted to use this kind of bubbly lead as a transition between these two parts. So listen how I've kind of like used the modulations and the filters and stuff to kind of like speed up that LFO and slow it down when I want to create these kind of like transition elements. Check this out. In case you're wondering, I think macro 2 is controlling the filter. So this one is controlling the speed. So it's like a much quicker slow down. And then right at the very end here, I'm like just kind of fading it out a little bit with the filter and then fading it back in again. And that's kind of like this running theme throughout the track to kind of like transition between these two parts. So I'm definitely going to render that out and edit it a little bit more finely with fade-ins and all sorts of stuff to really kind of like get that kind of like dub mix effect. I think that's also another really strong point about Shpongle tracks is that the mixing process. It's a very kind of like organic live mix. So I want to try and get as much elements into the track as possible and then kind of do a couple of runs where I'm just kind of like rewrite the automation of the faders and just kind of like ride them a little bit in and out to create these kind of like organic fade ins and fade outs and all that kind of thing. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is lay in some kind of like Shpongle-y tribal vocal loops, which we can kind of edit and fine tune to get that kind of like loopy vocal effect like I'm sure you've heard in a lot of Shpongle tracks. So you could use your phone for this and just record the audio directly into your phone, or if you've got like an external recorder, that also does help. Obviously, the mic I'm busy using to record the video right now, I'm not going to use that because that's capturing audio elsewhere. So the trick now is to put some headphones on, and what I usually do is just loop some drums and then, you know, some drums from the project to get like a feel of like the rhythm and the tempo. And then I just record a bunch of, okay, I've actually hit record already on the recorder, and then just record a bunch of loops and sounds and random kind of like gibberish stuff, which we can kind of edit up and fine tune. Don't worry too much about whether it's in key and the tune and stuff of it, because you can always fix that in the audio editing process. So yeah, I'm just going to go wild and record some random clicks and pops and things. Okay, I've got a bunch in here. They sound pretty ridiculous, but some of them, as you can see, are pretty distorted because of the wind and stuff. I didn't put a pop filter on, silly me. But what I want to do here is I want to go through it and find the best ones, remove the ones that are too like distorted. And you know what we're trying to do is we're just trying to create like a rhythmic thing. So we don't need the loop as it is in its entirety. We can replace the hits with ones that kind of sound like less distorted, or, you know, different like types of rhythms and stuff, and we can create these kind of variations. So I'm just going to go through this and, yeah, like I said, remove the ones that are not so great and replace the other ones and all sorts of stuff like that. So in these situations, because it's a stereo mic, sometimes it's like distorted on the one side and not on the other. So we could just actually process that so that we kind of capture the right side rather than the left side, you know, if we want the side that's kind of less distorted. So let's just bounce this and then go process, stereo flip. We don't want to flip left to right. We want to right to stereo. Apply. Okay, so the trick is to like really fine tune these so that they're, you know, there's no like clicks and pops. So what I generally do is I will zoom in the waveform like really high like this, and then go in and just make sure that these are like on the beat. You can actually go here and snap to zero crossing and just make sure that these are like on the actual zero crossings over here to get like a really, really clean sound. I'm going to do that over here as well. Sometimes you don't want it too like exact. Sometimes you do want a little bit of like offbeat groove to what's going on, you know what I mean? Just go like that. Sometimes you may want to give it a little bit of fade in, so I'm just going to play through it while we edit these and fine tune them. What I actually want to do is go events to part and then duplicate it like this, and then when I edit the one, it'll edit all of them. You can also experiment a little bit and kind of time stretch them to see if there's like you can kind of like change up the sound a little bit where there's those ones that are obvious repeats. And then I've got a sound here that I recorded in of me just going tsh, and then I'm going to reverse that to create a kind of like riser effect into this vocal loop. So the kilohertz resonator is one of my favorite effects to use on these kind of like vocal things, because you can kind of like tune it to a specific pitch. So let's say, for example, like tune it to G2. Wait, let's try it an octave lower, G1. what I want to do is I want to EQ a little bit of that kind of like high frequency out, so we can actually just punch in the bands like this. And then I'm going to put some delay on there just to give it like some extra activity in the mix. And then let's put a filter after this so we can kind of slowly modulate this inwards. Anyways, that's about all that we have time for today. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'm going to be posting links to Pete Callard's social medias and stuff in the comments if you want to go over and support him. Check out the other videos that I've done with him. He did the guitar parts in this if you're not aware of that. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think. See you guys next time. Cheers.